Well, I see lots of people joining us, so welcome. Welcome to the latest in the Fortuna Masterclass series. In recent weeks, I've been sitting down with colleagues to take a deep dive into the cultures and specifics of schools like Harvard Business School, Stanford GSB, Wharton, and it's fascinating to share those insider perspectives. All of those recordings of recent weeks are available on the Fortuna YouTube channel, must viewing for all of you. But now with less than 2 months to round one deadlines, we're starting a new masterclass series that looks at each of the specific components, each part of the admissions puzzle, letters of recommendation, application forms, your resumes. And today we're starting with essays that always loom large in people's minds. All of the core essays that cover your applications to the top US, European, and other business schools. Now, one of my favorite essay questions has been asked by the Duke Fuqua MBA program for many years now. It asks candidates to share 25 random things about themselves. Well, I'm going to share just one thing about me, and it's not at all random. As a member of the Fortuna team, I get to work with a truly remarkable team. I call them the dream team, who bring their admissions expertise, their guidance to the work that we do with so many candidates from all over the world. Which is why Poets and Quants has again ranked us as one of the 2 top admissions coaching firms in the world. And in fact, Fortuna has the highest admissions success rate to the top 10 schools again. So it's great to be able to work with such a talented group from pretty much every top school. We love to talk with you. You know, before we dive into applications, really getting to know you, and we offer these free consultations, which nearly always overrun the 30 minutes that we set aside because we really want to make sure that we can answer your questions. And we will read those resumes beforehand to really have what we hope is a very helpful, a very thoughtful, and a very worthwhile discussion about your hopes and dreams and next steps for business school. The Masterclass series is my chance, as I mentioned, to sit down with my wonderful colleagues. And for today, and the focus on the essays that go into those MBA applications, I'm joined by Michelle Belden. Michelle is a former Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Wharton, and one of the reasons I think why we're a top-ranked firm. And also with Patty Keegan, who's a wonderful member of the team, former Associate Dean at Chicago Booth, and also former Admissions Committee at Stanford GSB. So we've got coast-to-coast experience. I did mention that this is one in a series, and next week we'll be looking at letters of recommendation as you sit down over the summer to talk perhaps with your immediate supervisor or the right person, the right individuals to really share the sort of insights and perspectives about your performance, your values, characteristics that will really resonate with the business school. So that, of course, is next Wednesday, the same time. And then a week after that, we'll be focusing on not just a resume, but a killer MBA resume. And we focus the idea of a resume that really is designed for the MBA application, and then all of those other elements that are in the application form. So much like today, you can register and join. These webinars are intended to be very interactive. I've got lots of questions for my colleagues, but perhaps you do too. So do send in those questions as we go. And we're going to jump right in. Now, Michelle, you know this whole process so well, and we thought that we'd sort of give perhaps a bigger picture to get started. You know, the essential idea of what schools are looking to learn about you, the candidate, from the admissions essays. So maybe we can start there.
Yeah, it's a great place to start, and it's really, they are looking to learn who you are. That's like really the most important thing. And so like we're covering in all our master classes, is this first step is to really take that time for the introspection and really understanding, you know, who you are, you know, where have you been, what have you done, the experiences you've had, and how through these stories that best really can, you know, build this story of, show them who you are. The admissions committee is what you're hoping to do, right? You wanted them to understand what makes you tick. You want to bring your story to life. So, right, there's no right answer. It's like they want to learn about you. So it's really going beyond, these are the essays. So you're going beyond your academic record and a bit of your work history. They're going to understand that. So these essays are providing them more context, right? And you're connecting the dots for them. So I think that's a great starting point, because if I was reading the essays, as a admissions committee member, you want to make me as a admissions committee member really curious to learn more and, to pique my interest through those essays. You want to also be able to, really connect with the reader, right? So if you can be as authentic and honest as you can through your stories to really, again, show them who you are, that's really should be your goal. And is to really start by thinking about, like, who am I? What do I want them to learn? And how can I connect with the reader on the other end?
Right. As you said, there's no one approach, probably across the Fortuna Dream Team. There's between 300 and 400 years of admissions experience on the team. I mean, did you have a sort of a favorite approach? Did you sort of start with the resume and recommendations to then move into the essays when you'd already got some sort of background for the candidate?
Yeah, my starting point is, let's get things done that you guys are about 2 months out, but, get your resume really polished, what the business schools are looking for in the resume done, check. Start the process with your recommenders. You want to get them started, giving them enough time, being really mindful of that. And then, then you should really look to the essays. That's really your starting point of really your positioning and how you want to tell your story. And I start there with a brainstorm session, Matt. So really sitting down with my client and saying, let's look at the topic of the essay that you're going to start with, and let's brainstorm your best stories to tell, to answer. Remember, answering that question. And as we also know, many of them have the word limits. So sometimes, also what should be, the framework, how many words should be dedicated to this piece of the question, to this piece of the question, and really strategizing if there's 2 essay questions, 3, how you're going to tell your story across those essays as well. So it's not just looking, I will say, standalone, 1 essay at a time. It's by school. I would say, obviously with my Wharton hat on, 2 essays, they are together. They are telling your story, through 2 essays as much as you can, but it's really being strategic on, again, personal background, qualities, professionally, goals, etc.
Patty, with your experience at 2 M7 schools at both Booth and at the GSB, candidates perhaps wonder, well, how much importance do the essays have? I mean, the GMAT generates data points. It says, okay, you've got a good quant score, you can handle discounted cash flow and that core quant curriculum. There are these things that are already set in stone. So how important are the essays?
In my opinion, and at the schools for which I've worked in programs, extremely important. So those data points can only tell you so much. And the essays are really a chance for the admissions committee to get to know someone at a human level. I know, talking about business school, and it's become more common these days that, business schools want to know who you are as a person. Of course, they want to know if you can handle the work. Of course, they want to know if you can work well on a team and contribute to a team and be a leader, but they also want to know who you are, which I think essays are just a fantastic opportunity for you to do that. So very important.
Michelle, have you ever, with all of the candidate applications that you've reviewed, maybe the GMAT or GRE score wasn't quite at Wharton's average, or there was a gap in the resume, but you finished reading the essays and put them down and said, wow, we have to meet this person?
Actually, exactly. And I say that to my clients now, and especially I'll say with the HBS essay, you want to leave them with that wow factor of, I want to invite this person to interview and learn more. I want to ask them follow-up questions, because you've really made, like I said, that connection with the reader. Because as Patty said, we have these data points. We have your undergrad GPA, we have your test scores, and those are all important, especially, as you said, at Wharton, the rigor of the program. I want to make sure I'm bringing you in and setting you up for success. But at the end of the day, we are building a class of people, who are really going to add to the community, as they say, right? And the ethos of that program. And it's your background, your experiences professionally and personally that really make it as rich, and we talk about transformative as it really is. So yes, the essays are quite important. And again, it can at least push you to maybe to that next step of, let's meet you in person, let's ask you questions. And I think that is your goal, right? You're submitting this application, they're reading you on paper. How can you come to life so you get to that next step, which is the interview.
Now, I mentioned that in the course of the next 45 minutes, we're going to break down and look at some specific essay question types, and perhaps how our viewers can then approach all of them. But Paddy, before jumping into what matters most to you and why, or what the school should know about you, or with starting on Foucault's 25 random things, there are maybe some building blocks. We've identified it sort of as foundations to put in place before you start writing essays. So can you sort of perhaps take us through that thoughtful approach before that Hemingway moment and you start jotting down lots of ideas for the essays?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you need quiet time, which is, is not easy to find these days for any of us. But setting aside some quiet time to really think through this process, it's really a strategic thought process. What you're doing essentially is putting yourself forward in your best light possible in your candidacy. So really thinking about, a little bit of self-analysis goes into it, a little bit of honest introspection about who you are. This all sounds very touchy-feely, but it is important as a foundation to do this. So not writing a draft right away. Don't pick up the pen and paper. Don't sit down at the keyboard right away. Jot down notes and bullet points about what you want to include about yourself. I like to call it brainstorming with yourself. So the idea of brainstorming is that you write down, all thoughts, all ideas, and don't judge what you write down on there. So if you want the committee to know this about you and that about you, put that down in a list and come back to it. Just really spend some quiet, introspective time with yourself. And remembering that what you're sharing in your essays is it's what's not on your resume. Your essays should really be highlighting your personal values and what has shaped them to this point. So thinking about some of those things in your life that have impacted you to this point and why they've impacted you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the context of the Stanford GSB essay. Another good sort of foundational exercise that I like to talk to my clients about is, the importance of stories. Spending some time compiling and organizing your own stories that really demonstrate who you are and your interests and values. Because specific stories about you, bring who you are to life on the paper. So spend a little bit of time thinking about people and events and experiences that have formed you. And in the end, thinking about this essay, about these different pieces of who you are, I think Michelle said it a little bit earlier, what we like to see, or what admissions committees like to see, they want to get to know you. They want to go to that next step. They think, is this somebody I'd like to have a coffee with? Is this somebody who I want to ask more questions? Kind of pique their curiosity about you. So I'd say the quiet time and introspection, which is really hard to find these days for a lot of people. And then the other kind of obvious thing is make sure you know the question that you're answering. So do your research, what are the essay questions, the prompts asking you? Set aside some time to do some brainstorming, make those lists, compile those stories. And that's absolutely what you need to do before you start writing those essays.
I've been quoted often by John Byrne and the team at Poets and Quants about the gift of applying to business school. There's this wonderful opportunity, perhaps after the intensity of your studies, the 3, 4, 5 early years of your career, to be able to step back and that sort of introspection, Paddy, that you're then describing. But Michelle, also thinking strategically. I mean, my colleagues at Fortuna, you're both great examples. The things that you pick up in a people's resume, whether it's habits of leadership or connecting these dots from something they did in college and that now emerges 4, 5 years later. So there's so much context. Michelle, should the candidate be very mindful of those other parts of the application and therefore have the essays complement and build on, but really bring new information, as Paddy says, so that the admissions committee really gets to know you?
Absolutely. And I think there is this strategic mindset you bring to it. And like Paddy says, this starting point, because you have all these different components of the application, but many of them don't truly get behind and pull back the layers of what made that come to be, let's say. And therefore also what you would, as you do that introspection, is what are your key attributes? What are your values? What's important to you, who you are as a person, what you strive to do, impact, etc. And again, how are you able to bring that across? First, let's just say, with a resume, but with your letters of recommendation. So who are you asking, what they'll be able to highlight, and you yourself, what's important that you want to make sure they understand about who you are. And so strategically looking at the questions like Patty said, and really thinking about that is, I have always really, let's say entrepreneurial spirit. You really, you started that business back in high school, whatever it is, and you've really always had that within you. And that's something you really want to make sure you can highlight. Leadership qualities, teamwork, right? We know all these key components that the schools are looking for. So that is definitely important to keep in mind, but you yourself, who you are you a problem solver, right? Do you like to really go beyond, look the big picture, whatever it is, that's what you need to figure out about yourself. And that therefore you can share that with them and how you approach a problem, or how do you see the problem and how do you believe what's possible, right? So thinking really as much as you can in those ways, with really connected to your insight into your life purpose, your aspirations, as we'll get to. But I think that is really being as strategic as you can to make sure you can cover as much as you can, given the components of each school's application and what they're asking you.
But before writing our own essays, some candidates perhaps are tempted to read the essays of people that successfully applied to top business schools. And sometimes, Patty, I will hear, oh, well, I've got to pull on their heartstrings at the beginning, show that I, came through these challenging circumstances, and then sort of the Hollywood music that ends with a high note towards the end of the essay. But I mean, you said yourself, it's your unique, distinct story. So there's no right answer. It's your answer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And believe me, readers know if it's sincere. And I think it is a challenge to hit that right note between, that emotional tugging at the heartstrings, that sort of emotional piece, and sort of being a little bit more realistic. So kind of finding that balance between, but it has to come from the heart. It has to be a genuine approach to answering these essay questions, and in particular Stanford's what matters most to you. And above all, it's funny that you mentioned clients always want to see, or applicants always want to see, a successful essay. I think that's distracting, starting off seeing what's successful. That's someone else's story. I think in the mix of preparing for this, looking at successful essays makes sense at the right time. But I think it's a bit distracting at the beginning. And what I like to tell clients is, don't write what you think the school wants to read. That's such an important lesson. Don't try and reverse engineer who you are so that Stanford or Booth or Wharton or Harvard is going to be happy to read about your story. That is not a great approach, in my opinion. So good thing to keep in mind.
Well, we promised our viewers that we would sort of dive into specific essays. We're going to start with Harvard Business School. Michelle, you have a quite extraordinary success rate with all of those seniors in college applying 2+2, and the 26-year-old consultants, bankers, software engineers, the non-traditional profiles. So as you begin that work with them, how do you like to sort of frame tackling a question, what more should we know about you?
Yeah. I'll tell you, the first thing is, if you're applying to multiple schools, which most people are, I do usually say, don't start with Harvard. It's tough. I mean, such a question of like, what else do you want us to know? I always do say some people can start there, but it's also good, going back to what Patty said, if those stories that you've come up with, and if you've started developing them and material for other school essays, that can usually be helpful as a jumping off point as you approach the HBS essay. And for the HBS essay, I definitely say the whole point is they have learned about you through the other parts of their application. So go if nothing else, take a look at them or start, reading. So definitely reading through the application. They have great videos to really walk you through each of their, sections. So it's the resume, right? The letters of recommendation, and really their data forms. So they're learning all these great components about you professionally, what you've accomplished, challenges, your career aspirations. There's a short question. So when you step back and say, okay, they're going to get a good picture of me in this viewpoint, what else, again, go back to makes me who I am. And it's really not a resume to prose. We'll start there. As my colleague Carla Cohen always points out, definitely it is not that. It is really thinking of a theme, again, that really represents who are you, what's been important to you, your journey, and really digging deeper into, your truth, the moments in your life that really helped you get to where you are today. And like Patty said as well, that honest and authentic story really can make that human connection with the reader on the other end, especially HBS. And how to stand out is really to be as true as you can to yourself. And therefore thinking about, what is it about me really that I'm proud of, or that, that I've achieved, or that, something that was a setback and I got through. It could be a parent, it could be a role model. There's no right answer, right? But it is thinking about, what would I like to highlight through this essay, and really talk about, I've grown, I've changed, I've been challenged. And really looking at those different components can really make this a successful essay, because it's truly about you. And let's also keep in mind HBS, what they're looking for: habit of leadership, community engagement, analytical aptitude. So as much as strategically you can think about as well to bring those components they're looking for throughout the application. But again, in the essay, I can highlight my leadership within this, particular space of my background. That is also important, because that is who they're looking to bring in, because of, they're looking to educate leaders, general management education, but also aligning, I guess, yourself with, the components that they believe are important for you to find success. So I would say, again, it's a tough one I believe, to start with. And I think we're going to move to Stanford next. I think a good jumping off point is the what matters most to you and why essay from Stanford, if you happen to be doing both schools. I have many clients that don't do both schools, but at the same time, it's more of a, who am I, where have I been, the stories that I want them to know that they don't know from the other pieces of the application.
Right. Now, Chad Losey, the admissions director at HBS, and his colleagues Eileen and the rest of the team in Boston, part of the guidance that they give, Michelle, is to say, well, we start with your resume, then we look through those 2 letters of recommendation. So they've already got all of this background, and a lot of that will be professionally focused. So I've always seen this as perhaps an explicit invitation that says, if you're a banker, don't talk to us about more M&A deals that you've done. And if you're a McKinsey consultant, we don't need to know how good you are with decks of PowerPoint slides. This is about you. So is that the case, that they've already got this context, and then perhaps approaching this thinking, well, as the question says, what more, and going beyond that professional domain?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that, because, and I will say also, it's a building blocks, right? Like you said, if Chad, they say they start with this component, then read this essay now, again, is bringing you to life, and you're more than your job. You're more than your professional accomplishments. I'm not saying to leave those out, because I do have clients that will weave that in to the essay because it aligns with their theme, right? That's, again, another piece of their story, but there's much more to you. And ultimately, I think if you do find success with HBS, you have been able to articulate the whole story and background of who you are, what pushes you, what drives you, motivates you to get up every day. And that's going back. So that's my point is, it's really, and I think, again, Carla Cohen, great article that, we've had out there for a while, is this, movie reel of the story of your life. So again, if you start with Patty's recommendation, which, sit down and think about those stories, and then thinking about what are the most ones that, again, now there is a word limit with the essay, which I think will be much appreciated by the applicants, is that with this amount of words, what are my most important stories to weave this theme and to really build this picture of who I've become. And I do think you can bring in your professional piece and maybe ultimately aspirations, if that's a part of your story, but they will also understand and see that, as Chad points out, from those other components. So, and again, it's who are they getting from admitting you to their class? What are you bringing? Your excitement, your motivation, that the impact you hope to make, let's just say, on the world. Not to go that crazy, but that's what they would love to understand.
Right. One of our colleagues, Michelle Daniel, of course, Harvard MBA, and spent time working with the MBA admissions committee. We assume that all applicants to Harvard know about the case method. Certainly, they've been teaching it for 101 years. But he sort of reminds our viewers that, if you get called in a case, you have about a minute to say something relevant, on message, that contributes to the conversation. So just in reference to the word limit that was introduced just for the first time this year, do you think that then plays an important role? And how do you go perhaps from 2,000 words, it's a very open-ended question, and then really boil down when you're working with clients to the essentials to keep?
Yeah, I would say that every sentence adds value, right? We really can learn something from each sentence that you are, sharing with us. And I say I think it's helpful because without, the word limit, people were all over the place, right? Our recommendation, it was under 2,000, but we had successful clients write anywhere from 800 to 1,800. Because it's your story and it's how much space did you need to tell it. But now I think with the word limit, to really hone in and focus in on, again, you could start big, write out all your thoughts and put them together, see where you're at. And then it is really tightening it up. So, because again, you want it to be fast paced. They're reading lots of applications. You want to keep them engaged. And the whole point is to move from one, again, story thought to the next. And that it really can, again, builds on each previous paragraph, let's say, to an ultimate, this is ultimately who I am, what's important to me, what I strive, who I strive to be, and the impact I hope to make. So you don't need so much fluff, maybe. I don't know if fluff is the right word even, but that you really can tell your story, I absolutely believe, within the word limit now to a much fuller extent. I think that I always find 500 words with Wharton essay one is so tough because you can't give all that backstory. Therefore, let's say almost double HBS now. What else do you want us to know? There's quite a bit of space. And just think about everything is adding value and giving them more insight into who I am.
I think fluff is a very good word. I try to avoid fluff whenever I talk with Kirsten Moss, the Associate Dean of Admissions at Stanford. In fact, when Patty, when I was talking with Kirsten, when Stanford had made her the offer for her new role at the school, she said how excited she was to join the school that had this essay question. It's something that Derek Bolton came up with about 19 years ago. It's iconic. They've kept it. Judith, Michelle, and others, we all talk about how jealous their schools were that Stanford had such a great question. And of course, you got to read answers to this question with your time at the GSB. Michelle has sort of framed it as being a great place to start for anyone that's applying to business school. Why is it such a great question, and what it can unlock? And what is your advice to our viewers for how to then approach this essay?
Right. I think approaching this essay, so keeping it in context, right? I think it's a great introspective exercise, whether you're applying to Stanford or Harvard or Booth or Fortuna, wherever you're applying. Not that you want to take on another essay question just for fun, but in this particular instance, if you are targeting Stanford GSB, I think you need to remember, or at least learn, what they're looking for in their students. They're looking for people who not only want to excel in their careers, but people who want to, just to put it simply, to help others and make a real impact in the world. They have this, great tagline. It's a little bit, can be a little bit intimidating, right? But keeping that in mind as you're putting your thoughts together for answering this essay question is really important. I think also remembering that being specific to yourself and not generic. So, and what I mean by that is, and Michelle touched on this as well, is make sure every sentence adds value to the story, right? So being specific, coming up with those stories that are unique to you is really important. So how I like to kind of break this down for people who are thinking about approaching or applying to Stanford is, first step is really just, again, spend some quiet time. Start with identifying a person, maybe an event or an experience that impacted you in your life, and kind of create a free-form list and like brainstorming. Don't judge the list initially. Just write down some things that come to mind that have had, a great deal of impact on you and your values in your life to this point. And then second, think about what those values and lessons are, that you gain from this experience or from this person. So that's kind of step two. And then thinking about how you apply those values and those lessons to who you are today in your work, in your personal life. How do they impact you every day? How do they impact your drive and your motivation and your view of the world? So it's kind of I like to break it up into those three things, right? And please remember when you're writing, because I have so many funny stories about this, reading essays over time that don't forget about the why part of this, what matters to you, but remember to answer the why part. Sometimes applicants can get lost in explaining what matters to them and then forget to tell us why. Where did this impact come from? How does it show itself in your everyday life? Why and how did this idea or concept or experience become important to you? Remember to answer that particular piece. I think that kind of, captures it for me. I like to break it up into those three different areas because it's an incredibly intimidating question. And remember, don't write what you think Stanford wants to hear. I can tell you that's not a great way to approach this, but spend some time structuring what you want to say. It's really, really important.
Question a lot, and perhaps have family very high on that list. More cheekily, golden retrievers, and then whether or not I can sort of sneak Venezuelan chocolate into the list of things that really matter to me. quite why. But to the point that you'd made earlier in this webinar about, it's your answer, and don't try to think about what Stanford wants to hear. That tagline is intimidating. Change lives, change organizations, change the world. And Kirsten has mentioned in some of the events that we've held together, perhaps people try to overstretch and they've been working in investment banking for 3 years and now they want to eradicate global poverty or come up with clean drinking water solutions in sub-Saharan Africa. So is it always just bringing it back to sort of being very grounded and perhaps also things that then they'd be able to identify in other parts of your resume if it matters that much to you? Presumably the school expects to be able to see that relevance in other parts of the application.
That is a great point, Matt. I'm glad you brought that up because every piece of your application should complement each other. So you don't want to surprise the admissions committee by having them read something in your resume or in a short answer question and then come to this essay and have this disconnect between your story. So you really need to connect those dots and make it very seamless. That's really important part of the whole process. And especially at the GSB, the admissions committee also looks for a connection between the what matters most to you and the why Stanford. So I can tell you when we were reading these essays, they're right next to each other. There needs to be a lovely flow between the two answers. The two should complement each other. So starting, telling them about what matters most to you and why, and then that should naturally feed into why Stanford. What is it about Stanford that's going to help bolster you, help reach your potential, help reach your goals? So thinking about those two in tandem is really important.
Right. We work, Patty, with a lot of seniors in college or perhaps still in their master's program that are applying to HBS 2+2 at Stanford. It's described as deferred enrollment. And if not successful, it's lower than a 10% success rate, they might then be applying to Stanford 3, 4, 5 years later. Reapproaching this question, and perhaps this is true for any reapplicant, the response can evolve, right? From when you were 21, 22, and now a few years later.
I hope so. Yeah, I would hope so. Those are pretty impressionable years for someone's development, right? In terms of education, going from high school into college and then perhaps starting in a professional life. So it should evolve. Humans evolve. That's an important part of the story. Absolutely.
Now, Michelle, we're going to move to the careers question. I often think about Columbia for this one, but Wharton, London Business School, many schools want to understand the role that the MBA from their school will play. Columbia's got it down to what is it? There's 55 characters. Even Elon Musk, rarely writes a tweet that short, though it might soon be humble pie. Talk us through career goals, because again, from your perspective, that they're going to spend 2 incredible years with such a remarkable bunch of classmates. They could follow so many career opportunities. So, to what extent, what are you trying to understand from the applicant as they share those career goals?
Yeah, I mean, the schools that do ask, that are still asking, especially in essays about your career goals, it's important to them to understand, from where you are, right, what do you hope to do next, really, right? And how the MBA is going to fit into that and really benefit you in accomplishing those goals, right? We always talk about short-term goals right after business school, more specific, right? Are we changing industries? Are we just going into a role that's, more senior, so we need more management experience, right, et cetera? Are you a career switcher or not? And then long-term vision, long-term aspirations, right? What do you really, we talked about with both HBS, Stanford is, aspirationally, what impact do you hope to have? Where do you believe that you can really, fit in? But the goals, I will say, is it is this, again, reflection of what have you been doing professionally, right? What have you achieved? What have you learned skill-wise, knowledge-wise, that you understand now where you are in your career, where you hope to go next? So being able to articulate that is very important. But at the same time, I will say, like you said, from the other side, as an admissions officer, I know that those 2 years are going to be transformative. But most importantly, again, with my Wharton hat on, if you were coming in with no, really which way am I going to point, which, industry, what do I want to do? It's, I think Judith had said, drinking from a fire hose, right? Especially at Wharton, too many things going on. I need you to have, a clarity of purpose. I need you to understand, again, these are my transferable skills. These are skills that I am still lacking, and knowledge that I know I need to build and gain in order to go this next step in my career. And I will say the next step to that is understanding, or the admissions committee really wants to understand more so these days, Booth, Wharton, are the whys behind it. Why are these goals important to you? So therefore, you really are looking to address, what has led you to pursue these goals, right? What is it about your background, your experiences, your personality that really have provided this foundation? And giving that context, and going to the Columbia essay that is 500 words, is that context and understanding of what really has led you to want to, pursue and achieve these goals. And really, right, is the impact you're looking to make. So it's this career vision. It's quite big, but that you are looking to build. And in a business context, that, where are you looking to really, put your foot down and make your mark, and that it makes sense for you, right? So that's the most important part, again, is really being true to yourself, not looking to, well, I think, this sounds like a great next step for me, but it has to really be genuine, which is what it's the why behind it, because we want you to achieve your goals, and we want to see that you are coming in and have a rationale for pursuing them. And we do believe that our program in particular, that school, is going to benefit you and really, help catapult you and your career. So having that clarity of goals and tackling them is tough, but it is, again, for the schools that are continuing to ask that question, it's quite important to them.
Two follow-ups for that, Michelle. Maybe a possible red flag. You've been working as a digital marketing executive, or as a growth hacker, I think is one of the popular titles for that one now. And then talk about, moving into private equity or VC that we know is incredibly selective. So are there sort of red flags of what you did pre-MBA and then what you announced? And I think another one perhaps that concerns individuals we know ourselves that consulting is a wonderful way to consolidate the 2 years of business school, but sometimes candidates worry, is that too boring? That
Yeah.
I sort of share those immediate goals. What would you say to both of those two questions?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I get it a lot. So we'll say looking to move into the private equity VC, bucket, depending on what your background is. And I really push my clients, go do the research, go do the outreach, go talk to people that work there, tell them about your background, tell them about the skill set, again, that you have developed. Are those transferable skills? Can you make that jump? Because it is quite important, I will say, to the business schools that you are employable when you graduate. So that's a bit of what they are looking for. So therefore, are those attainable goals, right? Is that jump to VC private equity make sense given what you've been doing? And you really do need to either speak, if you have a coach or people that are working in that space, because sometimes it isn't a good fit and it's too big of a jump. It's not going to be achievable, right? So you do want this blend of aspirational but achievable goals that you are sharing. So, and I tell my clients sometimes as we're brainstorming, sometimes obviously we know there could be a path A, B, and C, right? So for the business school application and really telling the story and understanding the value of the MBA, which one might make the strongest and most compelling story for you given your background? I'm not saying you can't go do that, but is it going to do that? Will be believable. So I will say the VC private equity is a big jump for some people given their background. And then there's the consulting bucket, okay, we're going to be put in a big bucket with many people. But at the same time, absolutely, that's a great next step for many people. And therefore, again, you have to understand the why. Why is it going to be so great for you? What are you going to learn? What do you believe? So again, doing the outreach and the understanding, if I go work at Bain, BCG, McKinsey, what am I going to gain skill set wise? And really, again, get me to that next step in my career to ultimately be the stepping stone to what you long-term, 10 years out, aspirationally hope to get to. So again, makes sense to connect the dots from what you've been doing to what you hope to do. It is tough. If I really push my clients, I will say on the consulting bucket, if that is what they would like to do after business school, why? Tell me really specifically, what are you going to learn, gain? What have you done? What are you building on skill set wise? What do you believe that exposure looks like? Many of these consulting companies, as we know, have, practices within the consulting. So does that make sense that you want to go work within that practice because your focus is on X, Y, and Z, right? Like you really have to be able to go that deep to, again, because you want to stand out, but you also want them to see that you've done the research, you've done the homework to really understand the value. And then I don't know if we get into it, but and then the MBA is the big piece, right? That's going to be the really that complementing, jumping off point that kind of ties your career what you've been doing to where you hope to go, and it all makes sense. And the reader on the other end is like, okay, I see Patty coming in and I see what she's done. That's really interesting, her experiences. And I understand why she wants to go and pursue these goals. And I really do believe she understands, again, depending if the school's asking, the value of our program that will benefit her.
Right. You've created a wonderful segue for where we go next and turning to Patty. I must say, with comment that you made earlier with word limits on the essays and every sentence counts, with the two of you, every minute counts. I don't know how much insight both of you are sharing. And we're not finished, viewers, so do stay with us because we've got plenty more to discuss. And in this case, the idea of a particular school, perhaps its personality, we often talk about the fit of an institution and why, you talked earlier, Patty, about why Stanford, but why Booth, why this school, how it fits into the career piece Michelle was describing. So what are your tips and advice for tackling that sense of why the school and that sense of fit?
Right. First of all, I have kind of a funny piece of advice that comes from all the years of reading essays that I've done at Booth and then at Stanford is, don't repeat in your application, in your essays, what can be found on the school's website. Don't tell them how great they are. I can't tell you how many essays. It's like rereading what we had put on the website, right? The school, the admissions officers know who they are, know the school, know what the program does. So don't spend time doing that. But having said that, Do your research. Michelle talked a lot about research for career aspirations, for career goals. In this particular case, yes, read the schools, the program's website. Talk to students and alumni. Every school gives you the opportunity to connect, either online or in person, a phone call. Ask questions, do your due diligence, attend events. If you can attend events in person, great, but schools have so many events that are online these days. If you can, visit the school, spend a day there, go on a formal tour maybe, but just take some time absorbing the atmosphere there, looking at people, looking how people operate on the campus, what the feel is in the school. And that can only, can sometimes, it takes a lot of time. It takes research to do that. And then, kind of taking another step once you do that is asking yourself, and we talked about this a moment ago, how will this particular business school, help you with what you need to excel and reach your goals in your career? What is it specifically about Stanford, Booth, Wharton, Harvard? What is it that they offer that's going to help you? And be very specific about that if you can. Show the school that you've thought about clubs, about classes in the community that you want to join. They want to know how you're going to make the most of your 2 years with them. And, equally as important, what are you going to bring to them, right? What do you bring to the table? So it's kind of a two-sided thought process there. So spending the time is really important. And knowing how they teach, knowing what their classes are, knowing all of those things is really important for you to convince, an admissions committee that you fit in the culture, that you're going to be comfortable there and you're going to excel. No one on an admissions committee wants to bring somebody in that's going to be unhappy at the particular school. So you need to tell them, show them that you've done this research and that you're confident it's the place that's going to support you and be the best place for you personally and professionally.
A candidate that shares with Booth, Stanford, and other top school that they've memorized every page of the website, I actually think that would be quite an alarming thing to learn about any individual. But often they'll want to fill paragraph 12 and 13 with this long list of electives that they'd like to do in the second year. And it strikes me, business schools, that the names they give to their electives are always ridiculously long. So it takes up, a lot of space. And it's perhaps something, if I took 4 minutes, I could find that page, grab, cut and paste 3 or 4 interesting electives. So how do we sort of judge the sense of, you have taken time to look at the curriculum, core strengths, innovation, tech, all of these different areas. The lead program at Booth is a great example, touchy-feely at Stanford, but not overdoing it, because there's the point of, it was on the website and we haven't learned anything really about you.
I think the key is lists. You said incorporating a list of classes. Pick one. Pick one that you've read about, maybe spoken to an alum who took the class or a student who took the class. Make it genuine and real. I would rather read about something, that you've investigated with that particular professor, that particular class, than you just listing, these all sound really interesting to me, and I'm gonna take all of these classes if I can. I think being very specific is the key there.
Right. We talked earlier, Michelle, about the HBS question, and yet in their application form, they've embedded all of these mini essays. There are lots of short questions. Perhaps the advice is to answer a short answer is give a short answer. How do you like to approach them, and perhaps also emphasize their importance? There's a reason why the school's asking these questions, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a reason. And I always say the data forms in all the school's applications are quite important. So don't leave them to the end. And like I said previously about HBS, understand what they're asking you and what you are, going to be answering, because it's, again, strategic. So map out what goes where. Stanford has the new optional short answer questions. Again, strategically, what are you telling them about what matters most to you? Why Stanford? Okay, now you get these 3 opportunities about these impact. Do you want to shed some light on a specific work project, right? So you're really understanding what you can, again, tell them more about who you are. You could be reinforcing some certain attributes. You could be supplementing another area. And like going back to what Patty said, complementing. Everything should be building on each other and complementing all the different essays. So the short answers, and there are some short ones, HBS and Stanford, they have character limits, but they are important, right? So professionally, when they ask you, a challenge, really be, again, use each word, be as specific as you can be. And I think they are reading every answer. So therefore, if they're asking you a short essay or short answer question within the application, take the time to answer each of those. And again, what fits where, what am I revealing over here in this piece that I can then tell them something different over here. And also to that point is the resume itself, is going to give them information about your work and experience. It is not a copy paste to the data forms. Again, I believe HBS has the short videos to explain that. What else can you tell them, with the short answers, with your professional experience that they don't already know by reading your resume. So it's the value add that you can continue to build and, really widen their understanding of, what you've been given to do. You've gone above and beyond your responsibilities. You were chosen for this. You were able to, present to the management team in this space. So really having them be able to, get that full picture.
Right. You often, Michelle, start working with clients maybe on a couple of schools for round one, and then they've loved this experience. And then, well, I'd like to add a third school. So whether someone's applying to 2, 3, 4, 5 schools in any given round, and saying, oh, it's great because we answered this for this other school over here, so I can just cut and paste that. I mean, could you tell in admissions when, this could apply to any business school and it really doesn't resonate specifically with our school and its culture?
Yeah, I would say yes, but I think there are some of the short answers, I think, within applications that probably can be an easy cut and paste because it is just answering, and telling about your background that wouldn't be really, you wouldn't tweak it in any way specific to one school or another. So I think that's pretty safe. I think the essays themselves, and as Patty talked about, the real specifics about the program, that kind of copy paste, that it's very generic, right? That was my biggest thing. They weren't an essay one. If there was just a generic, I want to do this, they didn't really tell me anything specific about the Wharton program, then they haven't done the homework. But I think the short answers, usually they're pretty much just, giving facts about what you've done, your experiences, accomplishments. So that's probably, you're pretty safe doing that. But you should be, again, mindful that as you are looking to use the material and content that you have developed for one school, and then maybe using portions or pieces of it, retrofitting it for something else, again, are you going back to Pat? Are you answering the question if it's an essay question that they are asking, and therefore you do need to make, and giving yourself the time to make those edits and those tweaks to really show the school, again, this is a school that you're very excited about, that you want to attend, and that you've done your homework and research, and also have put in the time to the application itself to really, give them the best picture, the strongest application, compelling of who you are.
Now, the final essay question type, Paddy, turning to you, and I think a lot depends on how you interpret the word optional and how then you might choose to use it. Is optional? What's your guidance and advice for optional?
So it depends on the school, and making sure that you're, again, looking what the school is asking for. There are different kinds of optional essays. So, Booth has an optional essay that allows you to, explain or provide clarity on something that you didn't have an opportunity to do in the rest of the application. That could be something like, explaining why maybe your first semester or two of your undergraduate studies, you had, something going on with you family-wise or health-wise. That's where you want to explain, you want to take the opportunity and answer that optional essay question. Or maybe you want to, talk about something that had been going on in your family and impacted you, but it isn't an opportunity to write another full-blown essay. So make sure you're looking at the question itself. Stanford makes it even more complicated because their optional essays are things that you absolutely should answer. they're giving you an opportunity to name or to describe up to 3 examples of when you've, created a positive impact. And I'm always amazed that people don't answer that question. It's optional, yes, but it is so important that if you're writing an application for Stanford, that you provide those 3 examples. Do not pass that up, right? So make sure that you know what the meaning is of optional and what the school is looking for. So yeah, be aware of what they're asking.
Right. Given the importance of impact to Stanford and other schools, as you say, why give up the opportunity to highlight and showcase those 3 examples? But at the same time, they don't need this lengthy explanation of, well, I've never done well on standardized tests. And so were there certain things that you'd see in the optional essays and it's like, actually, I knew that about you from the resume, or you've just given me way too much detail in this optional essay?
Absolutely. I think it's always important to put yourself in the shoes of the reader and think admissions staff, admissions readers are humans, right? So think about someone reading these essays and what what they might be looking for. Don't lose sight of that.
I wish I was 26 again. No, I wish I'd met both of you when I was 26, and to be able to, the way that you hold up this mirror, back to this gift of applying to business school. And I think in the last 45 minutes, the way that you've sort of framed this journey, this opportunity to explore the introspection that's involved and really think deeply about those different areas. Now, some of the questions that we've got from our viewers, Michelle, I'm going to start with a careers question. We talked about, was talking about post-MBA in consulting too boring? Well, perhaps it's the idea that already pre-MBA, you're a consultant. Alejandra is asking, you're then looking to return to the same industry. So whether that's consulting and then back to consulting, or banking and back to banking, that shouldn't be the concern if the motivations, the passion, the excitement that you would feel are the same.
Absolutely, I agree. And I say, if nothing else, it shows that that company values you, right? Especially some of these companies do still sponsor, or your recommenders will absolutely want to speak to them wanting you to return. And it shows that you've really made an impact and you're a valued, piece of their company. So, and again, that you're passionate about it. Why do you love consulting? Why are you excited to go back, right? What really has resonated with you? What do you believe you're good at that you're going to continue? And again, you're continuing to grow higher on the ranks, manager, partner, et cetera. And that's important. Absolutely. So don't overthink it, right? And if you've been successful and that's where you want to return and continue, and then it's really looking to say, well, why can you do this without the MBA? And your goal through the application, depending on the school, is to be like, no, I know the value of the MBA to return armed with more knowledge, more skills, more, feedback on my leadership style, right? So it's really to think beyond, what am I gaining by not just saying I'm going to check that box, but no, that you're really excited for that opportunity, and then to return armed with these 2 amazing years of experiences and knowledge to bring back to the company.
Right. Paddy, we talked earlier about reapplying, not just for the seniors that applied deferred enrollment, but perhaps someone that applied the year before or a couple of years before. In fact, Gillen's question, I'm guessing that Gillen actually reached the interview stage at HBS and is now looking to reapply. So he wants to know, how much change perhaps should they introduce to the main essay in Harvard's case? What more would you like us to know? You get to look at people's previous applications, and there's more thoughtfulness that could be brought in. But what is your general advice for someone that's reapplying and how they might approach the essays a second time around?
Right. I think the change needs to be realistic given the time frame. So admissions committees, if it's been, a year or 2, they're not expecting that you've gone from, X position to heading the division or the company in a short time frame. So it has to be realistic, and has to be, meaningful change. It could be something as simple as, an introspective change, right? Like, over the past year, year and a half, I've done X, I maybe took this class, I had this experience, and this is how my thought process, how what I want has kind of changed, how that's impacted. It doesn't have to be something enormous. I think it's really important that it be realistic and honest. So yeah, that's usually my advice. I'm always my advice is usually very grounded, right? Like realistic. Think about, is this realistic? Talking about, the fluff piece. Be you, be genuine, be realistic and grounded.
Applying to college, one of the urban myths to a question that one of the colleges asked, the question was, what is courage? And the applicant responded, this is. That was it. So the final question that I have, Michelle, I'll turn to you for this one. We talked about word length, and one of our viewers is asking, how short is too short for the HBS essay, perhaps for any? I mean, you actually put it more in terms of getting things down to 500 words for the Wharton essay. Could an essay be too short?
Well, I will say the essays that do have the word limits, you need to take advantage of every word they give you, because why would you miss out on that opportunity to tell them more about who you are, which is what our big theme today, right, with essays. So if you have a 500-word essay, make it 500 words, because again, as a reader, again, Heidi said, put yourself in our shoes. If I was reading an essay, I gave you 500 words and you gave me 300, I'd be like, oh, I would have loved to learn a little more. What a missed opportunity. So the ones that give you the word limits, absolutely use the word limit. And for HBS, now that they have the word limit, what is too short? I would say, again, let's say a 500-word essay is kind of the general Columbia, Wharton, So I'd say anywhere from, let's say, 500 to the 900 words. And again, how much space do you need to tell your story? But take advantage that this is HBS. This is your one real big opportunity to tell them more about yourself. I'm not saying you have to go all the way to the 900. If you're about 750, that might just feel right. Because again, as I spoke about, you want to be fast moving, fast pace, everything is adding value. And maybe you can do that in about 750 words. That's just a number I threw out. But my point is but giving yourself, as you reflect, and read it, be like, no, I really feel like I covered everything in that 700 words. Perfect. And they appreciate that at Harvard. Again, at the other schools that give you a word limit, use it to your advantage. In that sense, actually, to point out, Matt, am I right that Booth has a minimum? Booth is the minimum. They are like on the other end, right? Well, Patty can speak to it, and you can but that's actually the only school, right, that has a minimum. So again, but being mindful of what you're giving them to read and the time it takes.
But Patty, perhaps the last word from you on Booth and the minimum requirement.
Yeah. The minimum, it's in the context of, how the Booth MBA will help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals, right? So they have a 250-word minimum, and they want you to add a little bit of depth to it, right? So they don't want you just to list, like create a list or give them, a very, very short answer, but they also, they want you to give something meaningful to them, right? And not just, one sentence. It is really unique, though, as I've gotten to know some other programs that Booth has this 250-word minimum. So be mindful of directions. It's really important. The admissions committee notices that.
With the extraordinary reputations you both have, I can see applicants saying, well, Michelle said it was okay for 700 words, and Patty said I could get away with 270. These things will become legend over time. I think as our viewers can appreciate from the time that we've just spent together, just the level of thoughtfulness and insight that they bring. A viewer's just written in to ask about the difference then applying to European business schools. Well, the great news, our colleagues at Fortuna were the directors of admissions at INSEAD, or Emma was the admissions director at London Business School. I think we have 15 colleagues from top European business schools, lots of recordings and resources on Fortuna's website and on the YouTube channel and Facebook and elsewhere, where we take specific dives into each and every school, INSEAD, LBS, IMD, HEC, Oxford side included. So I do encourage you to browse all of those extraordinary materials that the team at Fortuna Fortuna have put together. Patty and Michelle both said, finding out about your story, that's something that we really want to bring to the strategy sessions, these free sessions that we offer to find out about your background and where business school fits next. This was the first in a series of masterclasses. It was all about essays. Next week, I think we said it's on to letters of recommendation. And then the week after, we'll be looking at those mini essays in the application form in a bigger sense. And of course, your resume as you put all of these pieces together. But I guess at this point, I want to thank our hosts, Poets and Quants, and Tori, that always take such great care of us. And of course, it's always a joy to spend time with Patty, with Michelle. Thank you to both of you for a really wonderful session on the essays for people's applications.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's been my pleasure to be here today.